This is The Fall of the House of Usher, Part 2. Roderick Usher, whom I had known as a boy, was now ill and asked me to come help him. When I arrived, I felt something strange and fearful about the great old stone house, about the lake in front of it, about Usher himself. He appeared not like a human being, but like a spirit that had come back from beyond the grave. It was an illness, he said, from which he would surely die. He called his sickness fear. I have, he said, no fear of pain, but only the fear of its result, of terror. I feel that the time will soon arrive when I must lose my life and my mind and my soul together in some lost battle with that horrible enemy, fear. I learned also, but slowly and through broken words with doubtful meaning, another strange fact about the condition of Usher's mind. He had certain sick fears about the house in which he lived. He had not stepped out of it for many years. He felt that the house, with its gray walls and quiet lake around it, had somehow through the long years gotten a strong hold on his spirit. He said, however, that much of the gloom which lay so heavily on him was probably caused by something more plainly to be seen, by the long-continued illness, indeed the coming death, of a dearly loved sister, only his only company for many years. Except for himself, she was the last member of his family on earth. When she dies, he said with a sadness which I can never forget, when she dies, I will be the last of the old family, the house of Usher. And while he spoke, the Lady Madeline, for so she's called, passed slowly through the distant part of the house, and without seeing that I was there, went on. I looked at her with complete and utter wonder and surprise, and with some fear, yet I found I could not explain to myself such feelings. My eyes followed her. When she came to the door, and it closed behind her, my eyes turned to the face of her brother, but he had put his face in his hands, and I could only see with the thin fingers through which his tears were flowing were whiter than ever before. The illness of the Lady Madeline had long been beyond the help of her doctors. She seemed to care about nothing, and slowly her body had grown thin and weak, because remember, the most beautiful women on earth, Poe thought, were dead women. Okay, not because he had some kind of morbid fascination with the death, but because women who are alive suffer, are in pain, okay, are tormented by the stresses and pain of life. And when they die, they find peace. Well, Madeline is slowly wasting away. She's in pain every day. She's suffering every day. Slowly her body had grown thin and weak, and often for a short period she would fall into a sleep like the sleep of the dead. So far she had not been forced to stay in bed, but by the evening of the day I had arrived at the house, the power of her destroyer, as her brother told me that night, was too strong for her, and I learned that my one sight of her would probably be the last I would have, that the lady, at least while living, would be seen by me no more. For several days following, her name was not spoken by either Usher or myself, and during this period I was busy with efforts to lift my friend out of his sadness and gloom. We painted and read together, or listened as if in a dream to the wild music he played. And so, as a warmer and more loving friendship grew between us, I saw more clearly the uselessness of all attempts to bring happiness to a mind from which only darkness came, spreading upon all objects of the world in its never-ending gloom. I shall always remember the hours I spent with the master of the house of Usher, and yet I would fail in any attempt to give an idea of the true character of the things we did together. There was a strange light over everything. The paintings which he made me tremble, though I do not know why. To tell of them is beyond the power of written words. If ever a man painted an idea, that man was Roderick Usher. For me, at least, that came out of his pictures a sense of fear and wonder. One of these pictures may be told, although weakly in words. It showed the inside of a room where the dead might be placed, with low walls, white and plain. It seemed to be very deep under the earth. What do you think he's describing, guys? Where do people, especially people with really old houses, keep their dead? Do you know what that's called? It can be a vault. It can be catacombs. Okay. It's usually, you'll have a lot of marble, white marble, and a heavy sarcophagus, which holds the coffin and the dead body. And they would be encased in there within the family home instead of a cemetery, filling it with a horrible, ghastly brightness. I had spoken of the sickly condition of the senses which made most music painful for Usher to hear. The notes he could listen to with pleasure were very few. It was this fact, perhaps, that made the music he played so different from most music. But the wild beauty of his playing could not be explained. The words of one of his songs, called The Haunted Palace, I could easily remember. Oh, sorry, I spilled this down. In it, I saw for the first time that Usher knew that his mind was weakening. The place told of a great house where a king lived, a palace in a green valley, where all was light and color and beauty, and the air was sweet. In the palace were 2 bright windows from which people in that happy valley could hear music and see smiling ghosts and spirits moving around the king. The palace door was one of the richest materials, in red and white, though it came other spirits whose duty was to sing their beautiful voices of how wise the king was. But a dark change came. The song continued, and now those who enter the valley see through the windows in a red light shapes that move to broken music, while through the door, now colorless, a ghastly river of ghosts, laughing, but no longer smiling, rushes out forever. Whew. So this song that he came, it first spoke of this wonderful idea of death, where the ghosts would be merry and happy and forever. And then it takes on a dark turn where all of a sudden the ghosts are no longer happy anymore. Our talk of this song led to another strange idea in Usher's mind. He believed that plants could feel and think, and not only plants, but rocks and water as well. He believed that the gray stones of his house and the small plants growing on the stones and the decaying trees had a power over him, and that made him what he was. Our books, the books which for years had fed the sick man's mind, were, as might be supposed, of some wild character. So he believed the trees on side, the way they decayed, the way the house decayed, that was representative of his own decaying mind. Some of these books Usher sat and studied for hours. His chief delight was found in reading one very old book, written for some forgotten church, telling the watch over the dead. At last one evening he told me that Lady Madeline was alive no more. He said he was going to keep her body for a time in one of the many vaults inside the walls of the building. The worldly reason he gave for this was one with which I felt I had to agree. He had decided to do this because of the nature of her illness, because of the strange interest and questions of her doctor, and because of the great distance to the graveyard where members of his family were placed in the earth. We too carried her body to its resting place. So he was worried because Madeline's illness was so weird, so odd. He worried that the doctors might possibly dig up her body in the graveyard so they could study it and try to figure out what exactly was happening. And he didn't want that. So he put her into the vault inside the house. The vault in which we placed it was small and dark, and in ages past it must have been strange and bloody scenes. It lay deep below the part of the building where I myself slept. The thick door was of iron, and because of its great weight made a loud, hard sound where it was opened and closed. As we placed the Lady Madeline in this room of horror, I saw for the first time the great likeness between brother and sister. And Usher told me that they were twins, that they had been born on the same day. For that reason, the understanding between them had always been great, and the tie that held them together was very strong. We looked down at the dead face one last time, and I was filled with wonder. As she lay there, the Lady Madeline looked not dead, but asleep. still soft and warm, though the touch cold as the stones looked around us. So instead of taking on this gruesome, cold corpse look, Madeline looked like she was in a peaceful sleep. And think about the motives, the motifs, the themes. Poe always included dead women, or almost always included dead women in his stories, but they weren't grotesque. Lady Madeline looks at peace. She looks like she's still warm and has a rosy hue about her because she's peace in death.